I'm honored to welcome you all here to the official opening of the Fort Christina National Historic Landmark. And let me just say, since I don't get to say nice things about him later, to both my current governor, Jack Markell, who's behind me and has just given us great support in the Department of State and in the Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs to do things like this. Thank you, Governor, very much for all your help over the course of the last 7.5 years. And to my other governor, who I don't think, oh, he has arrived. To my other governor, who's behind me now, and our current Senator, Tom Carper, thank you for your incredible efforts to make this site and a number of others around our state part of Delaware's first national park. Really a great thing. So thank you to both of them. This reopening is made possible through a partnership between the Delaware Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs, which is part of the Department of State, and the Kalmar-Nickel Foundation. I want to take just a minute to recognize all of the partners here along the 7th Street Peninsula for their great work that they're doing not only here but up and down the peninsula. Starting with Ethan McKinley, who's the superintendent of the National Park Service here in Delaware. Ethan, I think, is behind me somewhere. And Lauren Fletcher, who does interpretation and education coordination for the same. To Bob Hara, who is the board president of the Kalmar-Nickel Foundation, and John Morton, the former board chair, and Kathy Parcells, who is the executive director of the Kalmar-Nickel Foundation. Thank you all for your great work. To Megan McGlinchey, who I know is not with us. Oh, she is. Hi, Megan. Megan snuck in. To Megan, who does an absolutely terrific job on the Wilmington Riverfront Corporation, who I'm a member of that board as well. And to Rebecca Wilson and Mike Hauser from the Old Swedes Foundation. Thank you all for your terrific work and everything you're doing down here in this part of our city. And also to Jeff Flynn, if Jeff is around, from the city, also provided terrific support to what we're doing today. We're not joined today by Tim Slavin, who is the director of the Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs. He has a little family emergency that everything's fine, but he's attending to that today, so he couldn't join us. But to Tim and to Suzanne and to everybody that's part of that team, and I said this to Suzanne Savory earlier today. One of the things that has bugged me since I became Secretary of State was the lock on that gate out there. And the fact that the people, not only the people who live in this community, but people up and down our state didn't have easy access to this historic site. So today, that all changes again. And as a Secretary of State, I'm very, very happy. I'm very, very happy that it is. So now to get us started, I'm going to ask Emily Teep to perform the national anthem. And as she comes up, let me just say, Emily is a native of Wilmington and a direct descendant of the Swedish colonial settlers of the 17th century. She studied at Princeton and Juilliard and traveled to Sweden to study Scandinavian classical vocal music. She has performed at the Royal Opera in Stockholm, and in 2015, the Vasa Order named her Swedish American of the Year. Emily, if you could join us, thank you.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night
Thank you, Emily, and thanks also to the Wilmington Fire Department for that incredible fireboat display we had as many of you were walking in. So, Fort Christina was opened in 1938 to celebrate the landing of the Swedes and the Finns in Delaware 300 years prior in 1638. In 2014, this historic site became one of 7 components of the first state National Historic Park, recognizing the national significance of the early Swedish and Finnish settlers. The Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs continues to celebrate the history of Swedish and Finnish settlements through tourism programs in collaboration with the Kalmar Nickel Foundation, Old Swedes Foundation, the Riverfront Development Corporation, and our newest partner, the First State National Historic Park. So please welcome Ethan McKinley, the superintendent of the First State National Historic Park.
Good afternoon. I think we're just over noon right now. Wow, where to start? This is a pretty exciting place to be standing. It wasn't just a season ago that those gates behind you were not open to the public. This park has been #1 priority for the Park Service coming here to Delaware for First State National Historical Park, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about why this place is so very important, both to the community surrounding the park and to tourists coming to Delaware from all over the country, as well as Europe. We already have international tourists seeking out this place to come see it because it means so much to them. So, I'm going to get started off with a quick plug for the First State National Historical Park, which is a brand new park. We're only 3 years old, and in park terms that means we're just an infant. We have 7 sites throughout the state, 2 here within just a couple of blocks in Wilmington. Old Swedes Church just down the road here, part of the very same narrative that brings us here today. And our strong partners over at the Kalmar Nickel, which is not a site, but it's also part of the same narrative. We've teamed up with the local community to make this happen, and it's really exciting. Historical and Cultural Affairs of Delaware, who owns this property and who has spearheaded the initiative to get this park open, we can't thank them enough, as well as the Kalmar Nickel Foundation, who has provided the operating capacity to make this place work. And they're basing that out of their new educational facility next door. So I'm going to get a little bit to why this place personally means a great deal to me. One is the obvious one. It was the only one of our 7 sites that wasn't open to the public. And when you're running a national park, that's a shame. So we have been working very closely with the community to make this happen, and I am thrilled to say that First State National Historical Park's doors are open at all 7 of its sites to the public. So that's something we're celebrating. So can we get a round of applause for that? And it was just said that this place in 1638 was a landing site of the Swedes and the Finns that came with the Swedes on these very rocks behind us. And it was here that they established the Swedish colony for the very first time as the epicenter of the colony. And before them, the Linni Lenape were here. That's to say that this site dates back not just those 300 plus years to the Swedish landing, but well before them the site was occupied. That human occupation was for a reason. It was great access to the waterfront, there was a deep harbor, and it was a great place to settle. This story isn't just about the Swedes, though. This is an extremely important site. Someone put it better than I did in my speech notes here this morning and said that this was Plymouth Rock for the Swedish colony. And in a lot of ways, we can trace the roots of the country back to Delaware. It is the first state. And we can trace the roots of Delaware to this very site. So I encourage you to get out there and learn a little bit more about your history. It's very exciting. And there's layers of history that have happened since that original landing as well that I wanted to point out. Some things that are lesser known that make this site relevant not just to those of Swedish descent, but those folks of every color and creed here in Delaware. This site is actually part of the Underground Railroad. It's little known, but it is, and that's a story we're going to be telling here as well. This is also the place where the first known black settler to come to Delaware landed, and he eventually became a farmer and a boat pilot here as part of the Swedish colony. He was not, he became a freeman. On this site in 1938, getting a little more modern history, we have Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who dedicated this site. And I'm sure what was a rousing speech, but we don't have the record of it. I've been looking for it everywhere. But it was of that level of national importance that the Swedish royal family came here. A little known fact as well is that the King of Sweden was in a ship in the harbor and could not make it here, and I heard that it was kidney stones. But he did listen on the radio in 1938 to the speech that was being given at this site, and the Prince and the Princess were here as well. So I think that's all to say that we're extremely excited to be able to tell the story of this site. As multitudinous and as multifaceted as it might be, the story has been an extremely important one. And the fact that the gates are open again and the storytelling can begin is a wonderful thing. So we're very happy to have this essential part of starting up a new national park. And we're very excited to engage in that storytelling in the coming months and years, and working with the community to make this a really relevant site to everyone surrounding it, including tourists. So, I'm going to leave you with a quote from the very profound speaker that was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, because he gave a speech at this site, not this speech, but it's one of my favorite quotes, and you'll see why. "There's nothing so American as our national parks. The scenery and the wildlife are native. The fundamental idea behind the parks is native. It is, in brief, that the country belongs to the people, that it is in the process of making for the enrichment of the lives of all of us. The parks stand as the outward symbol of the great human principle." And what a charge. We are extremely humbled to be part of that storytelling and for this to be part of our national park system. For not only the local stories to be told, but those that are nationally significant as well. So thank you for having us here, and thank you so much for making this happen as part of the community. I'm going to introduce one of the key players in this whole effort to get this place up and running, and that's Rob O'Hara. And he's on the Kalmar-Nickel Foundation board. He is an active supporter of the history of the place. He's done a tremendous amount to make this place happen. And I'm also going to let him explain a little bit about the 7th Street Corridor Coalition, which is a local group that's going through a development process. This was one of the first things to tangentially come out of that group, but it's going to be a community-led effort, something that we work closely with the Old Swedes Church, this site, and next door the Kalmar-Nickel Foundation, along with the community, the Riverfront Development Corporation, and the city and state, to make sure that this place is a sustainable attraction. That we're not just taking into consideration it as one site, but we're taking into consideration it as a thread that connects this community. So I'm excited to announce Rob O'Hara, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about it.
The fireboat will return in 5 minutes and aims at water cannons this direction. So just bear with me. Hope is on the way. I represent, as Ethan said, I represent the Kalmar-Nickel Foundation and the East 7th Street Coalition, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in just a few minutes. And in keeping with the Franklin Roosevelt stories for the day, I thought that I would share with you, or maybe remind you, of the story that I believe is true, when his son asked the president for advice on public speaking, his son having to speak for the first time apparently in a public place. The president told him his 3 rules of public speaking: be brief, be sincere, and be seated. It's a little humor, folks. Thank you. Thank you very much for the applause. With that in mind, I have 4 vignettes to share with you. They're brief. All 4 of these vignettes fall into the category of dreams fulfilled. Dreams fulfilled. The first one, and in keeping with Ethan's comments about telling stories about this place, the first one is something that I don't know how many of you Delawareans or visitors know, is that until the mid-1930s, this beautiful park that we now enjoy, which was the landing site of the Swedish colonists in 1638, it was the maintenance yard for the Wilson steamship line. I'm looking around for some glimmers of recognition to the Wilson liners. Thank you very much. Which we used to take back and forth to Philadelphia or over to Riverview Park. Pardon me, this was their maintenance yard. And the site was acquired in the late 1930s in time for the 300th anniversary of the landing of the Swedes and the founding of the Swedish colony here in Wilmington. That commemoration, as Ethan has just touched on, took place in 1938 when this site was dedicated by President Franklin Roosevelt and by Prince Gustav Bertil of Sweden. And until this moment, I was wondering where the king was, and I just found out from Ethan he had gallstones or some similar attack. So we're sorry for that, but we're glad the prince was here at that time. So creation of this park was dream fulfilled #1 for a lot of us. Vignette number two. Page the calendar forward to the mid-1990s. For many years, there was a long-standing dream to create a replica of the sailing ship, the Kalmar Nickel, that brought the Swedes to the New World. Many attempts were made to build that replica. In fact, they began and ended with no ship. And then they began and ended again with no ship. And so several times since 1938, there were efforts to build a ship. And then came the resurrection of Wilmington's riverfront under Governor Carper's leadership. And with that resurrection became also then the recreation of the Kalmar Nickel, because many of you remember that the ship, Kalmar Nickel, the replica, was built next door in the shipyard. And as hard as this may sound to some of you hardened Kalmar Nickel veterans in the audience today, the ship was built and launched, if you can believe this, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, so that next September 1997, I wish it was 1997, that's when she was launched. Next year in 2017 will be the 20th anniversary of the launching of Kalmar Nickel. Thank you. And as you all know, she continues to proudly represent the state of Delaware today as our tall ship. So Kalmar Nickel, dream fulfilled #2. Frankly, reopening this landing park is a dream fulfilled for many of us, dream fulfilled #3, especially the Old Swedes Foundation and Kalmar Nickel Foundation. In particular, Kalmar Nickel's Executive Director, Kathy Parcells, who is somewhere in the audience, that is right there. Kathy Parcells, former board chairs John Morton and Hunter Lott worked over several years with the state to reopen this park. Today, Kalmar Nickel is here every day, the foundation's here every day, under agreement with the state, opening and interpreting the park for visitors, and we'll be here until Labor Day. Again, dream fulfilled #3. My last vignette, and then the fireboat will come, is that you probably don't realize, but there's no reason why you should, but that since 2012, close to $10 million in investment has taken place in both public and private funding and has been invested here in this gateway to the East 7th Street Peninsula. The $10 million. One, Kalmar Nickel has built a new home, a new dock, new parking area, and new museum. #2, the Challenge Program next door. Andrew McKnight's here today. Built a new building, approximately 3 years old. And our great neighbor, Naramco, has renovated the building across the street that has the mural on it for their use. So add all of that up, it's close to $10 million in public and private investment that has taken place here on East 7th Street since 2012. Thank you. Now, with all this investment and cleanup at this end of the peninsula, a group of us representing the historic sites on the 7th Street Peninsula and coordinated by Ethan McKinley formed the East 7th Street Peninsula Coalition and began meeting last summer. The coalition is comprised of the State of Delaware Division of Historic and Cultural Affairs, the National Park Service, the Riverfront Development Corporation, Old Swedes Foundation, the City of Wilmington, and Kalmar-Nickel Foundation. The coalition's initial objectives were twofold. One is to link the new Copeland Maritime Center and Kalmar-Nickel Shipyard, to link that shipyard, this park, and the Old Swedes Church and Cemetery and other riverfront attractions to create a new visitor experience and build tourism in this part of Wilmington. Frankly, reopening this park was the centerpiece of this objective. And number two is for us to work together to develop coordinated marketing programs and promotion for this area. You may have noticed, in fact, it's on the back of your booklet today, these are actual banners that this coalition designed, produced through the generosity of some donors, corporate and mostly corporate donors. And now you'll see these banners throughout this general area. In fact, there are 30 of them that have been installed since April, again promoting the tourist attractions of this of the East 7th Street. The coalition also worked to promote Springfest, which was held here in April. This event was organized by Old Swedes and Kalmar-Nickel and other Swedish organizations. It was a fun day for families and was rooted in the Swedish colonial experience. So this coalition that I just talked about is another dream fulfilled, number 4. And the coalition's focus, continuing focus on this peninsula, will continue to be a dream in the making. So thanks for being here today. Thanks for listening to my 4 stories about the East 7th Street Peninsula. And we invite you back. We should visit more often. Just because the Up the Creek restaurant and bar is closed doesn't mean you can't visit us now. So please come back and see us. And with that, I will close and introduce in deference to heat and humidity. I will not give him a long introduction other than to say that Jack Markell continues to serve us here on the riverfront by his continuing support of this initiative being the development of the Christina riverfront and this area in particular. So thank you very much, Governor.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Bob. The good news for all of you is that the hotter it gets, the shorter I speak. And the other good news is all the speakers are sitting right in the sun. So I will be brief. I do first want to introduce a number of elected officials who are here. You'll be hearing from Senator Carper in a moment. Senator Coons is represented by Andrew Dinsmore, and Congressman Carney is represented by Molly McGarrick. A number of other officials who are here, representatives from the General Assembly, Stephanie T. Bolden and J.J. Johnson, as well as Senator Sikola. Our county executive, Tom Gordon, is here, also a member of County Council Penrose Hollins. Is that Dennis? Is the mayor here? Okay. The sunglasses, I couldn't quite tell. So the mayor is here. Theo Gregory is also here. Darius Brown, Bud Friel, Justin Wright, and Maria Cabrera. Hanifa Shabazz. How you doing, Hanifa? You were crossed out. They didn't think you were coming. So good of all of you to be here, and I think it says a lot that so many elected officials did come today. You know, when I come here, I have to think back to the visit by the King and Queen 3 years ago, which was an amazing visit. We've been so blessed in Delaware that they've come every 25 years, and so 3 years ago was the 375th anniversary of the Swedes and the Finns coming to Delaware. And we had an amazing day with them. I think it took like 24 to 25 years to prepare for their visit. It's taking the next 24 to recuperate from their visit. But I will tell you that they were so impressed by this spot and by the reception. And Carla and I and our son Michael had an opportunity a couple months afterwards to go to Sweden. And we didn't see the King and Queen on that visit, but we saw the Queen, I think it's the Queen's Lady in Waiting. We saw the ambassador again, and they were still just overflowing with praise. One, I should say, they were overflowing with praise for Emily, who did an amazing job. Your performance when they were here was extraordinary, and they were, yeah. We are so lucky to have you in Delaware, because I mean, literally, this is truly like a world-class singer, and this is the third time I've gotten to hear you, and you're amazing. But they were just overall blown away. I mean, this is a really gorgeous spot. If you look at this and look backwards through the trees and just, you know, where we are in the water, it's a pretty spectacular place. And when you think about the history and what this means for our state, it really is, it is that special. And now that this is part of the National Monument, makes it only better. And we got to hear about that from Ethan, and we're grateful to hear from him, and also to know about all the work that the Department of State has put in with all the other member organizations, which were introduced. But the truth is, something like this does not happen with all the other organizations working together. So it's a great opportunity for us to reopen this place so that more Wilmingtonians, more people from Newcastle County, more people from Delaware, and tourists from throughout the region, throughout the country, and throughout the world can come here and appreciate what an important spot this is for those of us in Delaware, and what it means to the Swedes and the Finns as well. So I will close out by Senator Carper. When Bob said he was going to give me a short introduction, Senator Carper said he wanted a long introduction. So a huge introduction. So I will say two things. So first of all, there's no question, you know, when we get to, you know, hear from Ethan and talk about the National Monument, the National Park, we would not be doing that without Senator Carper. Senator Carper, on any issue that he cares about, he's like a dog with a bone. He will not let it go. That's a compliment. I'm sure he took it that way. But we would not be here to celebrate all of that without his really incredible persistence over the period of many years. There's another part to the story which I have not mentioned to him, and it really has to do with the visit by the King and the Queen. So the King and the Queen have been very, I think at least for the last 75 years, they've come every 25 years. And so I guess Senator Carper's tenure did not overlap with one of those 25-year periods, but the unveiling of the Kalmar nickel did. And I was on a train recently, and I was seated next to a guy who was a former U.S. ambassador to Sweden. And when I told him I was from Delaware, he went and he told a long story about the remarkable persistence, and I don't remember his name, you probably remember who it was, that then Governor Carper was just so persistent trying to get the King and the Queen to visit for the Kalmar nickel. And while in the end they did not make that visit, they did come back for the 25th, and he knew all about it because he had heard from the people who work with the King and the Queen that finally that Senator Carper's and Governor Carper's request had been honored. So even when we don't know about his persistence, it is there. Trust me. Many of us have been the beneficiaries and the recipients of that persistence over a long period of time. So as have the people of Delaware, and it could not be give me more pride to introduce a phenomenal senator in the state of Delaware, our very own Tom Carper.
Governor, thank you so much. I'm going to take my hat off to one of the two best governors that Delaware has ever had, Jack Markell. Let's hear it for him. All right, Jack. Love working with him. And Chris Coons and John Carney are not here. They're represented here, but their hearts and spirits are here. They are very much involved in legislation, getting it through the Congress, along with Ted Kaufman and Joe Biden, Mike Castle, and all over the years to get our national park legislation finally passed. And we're grateful to all of them. I'm going to talk a little bit about this hat in just a minute. But Rob, would you come here just for a second? Rob, when speaking about persistent, we're trying to put together the Riverfront Development Corporation Board, and we had some good ideas of how to do it. And we're looking for a great leader in the business community to be part of the board. In fact, several great leaders. And Rob, do you remember the conversation we had all those years ago? And when I took you for a long drive out at midnight down on the 7th Street Peninsula, and I had my had my executive security with me, and we're driving along, and I said, how'd you like to be on this board? And it was like about midnight, the stars were out in the morning, and he said, I don't know, I've got plenty else going on. And the guy who was my state trooper that day was really big guy, Carl Bond, really big guy. And I said, Carl, I don't think he's interested in doing it. Can you help me convince him? Carl took out his pistol, put it on he put it on the dashboard of the vehicles we're driving along, and I could feel like Rob kind of lurch a little bit at that moment. But what really did is he still wouldn't do it. He still wouldn't say he would get on the board. But then Carl cocked the pistol, fired a warning shot outside the window, down by the old restaurant down there. Rob said, count me in. And he's never wavered. Give him a round of applause. I mean, like, president of creation. President of creation. Speaking of the creation, how many of you remember coming down to the river here, and when the Kalmar Nick was being built, right down there? I remember bringing our boys. They were 2 and 4 when I could be governor, and we would come, and they got older, and we would come down probably every other weekend, and just see the progress, and for everybody who helped build it, and to make that such a special attraction really a symbol for our state. Thank you so much. How many of you were members of the state General Assembly in, say, 1995, 96? How many of you were members of the Delaware General Assembly? I would say to David Sokola, to Dennis, others who followed the leadership then of Patty Blevins, who was now the President Pro Tem of the Delaware State Senate, then the co-chair of the Bond Bill Committee, Roger Roy, a Democrat and a Republican. He was the House co-chair of the Bond Bill Commission. They supported about $90 million. Jeff Jeffrey was our chief of staff at the time, supported $90 million appropriations over about 7-8 years to really get us started on the riverfront and to actually build this ship for everybody who was a part of that. I just want to say a very, very special thank you. When the story of the history of our national park of the East started sharing, it goes all the way to the southern part of Delaware. Lewis, Delaware, discovered almost, or I should say, settled almost 400 years ago by the Dutch. They were wiped out by the Indians, came back, and rebuilt the place, and built a settlement. And later on in years, the Dutch were surrounded by the British. The British burned Lewis, Delaware to the ground. The only thing that was left in Lewis, Delaware after that incident one night was one house. The Rivas Holt House was believed to be one of the oldest standing houses in North America. That is the southern anchor, if you will, of our national park, and tells the story of the early Dutch settlement here. Come up toward the Dover Air Force Base, and you get to the Dover Air Force Base. You head north on State Route 1. Just before you get there, the John Dickinson Plantation. Who is John Dickinson? It's not just a high school. John Dickinson was the early one of the guys who wrote the early writings to incite and motivate people in this country to stand up against the tyranny of the British throne. That's who John Dickinson is, and he signs all kinds of documents, famous historical documents as well. And you come up to Dover, we have the green there. We're right there at the Golden Fleece Tavern. The Constitution was first ratified in December 7, 1787, making Delaware the first state for one whole week where the entire United States of America. We opened it up, we let in Maryland, we let in Pennsylvania, we let in New Jersey, and then 46 others. I think it's turned out pretty well. Although I was in Vietnam a couple of months ago, and the Vietnamese people were polled, and they were asked about other countries, how do they feel about other countries. 84% of them in one poll said their favorite country in the world was America. 95% of the Vietnamese said in another poll earlier this year their favorite country was America. They like us more than we like us. Go figure. But coming on up here, Newcastle, old Newcastle, about over 300 years ago, William Penn got off of a ship. He didn't get off a ship at Penn's Landing in Philadelphia. He got off of a ship in Newcastle, Delaware, and brought with him the deeds to what became Delaware and what became Pennsylvania, and led to the early settlements. Our national park, part of our national park, was right up on the Delaware-Pennsylvania line. Beautiful piece of land. Go see it when you have a chance, and all those old Quaker settlements that are up there. And here. One of my great joys as a U.S. Senator was standing here right in front of this edifice. We had hundreds of people here, including the King and Queen of Sweden, the governor, and Carla were here, and a lot of you. How many people were here that day? How many people were here that day? And that evening, Emily sang beautifully, and we had a wonderful state dinner. And the Queen, I sat next to the Queen of Sweden, and she said to me, "Who was that crazy governor who used to drive my husband crazy about 12 years ago, trying to get us to come for the christening of some ship?" And I said, "I don't know. I've lost track of him." Well, we tried hard to get them to come, and ultimately they did. You know who did come? The Crown Princess. The Crown Princess of Sweden came, and we literally walked right down this area right here, and I was governor at the time, and we were talking about how people call, what do people call her? What do you call the governor of Delaware? And I said, Governor of Delaware formerly is referred to, as Jack knows it, referred to as His Excellency, or Her Excellency, the governor of Delaware. And I said, how do people refer to you? And she said, you may refer to me as Your Highness. So I've called her that ever since. But in any event, we had a storied adventure getting to this point in time. I just want to say, walking down here, Governor's already mentioned it, walking down among all these trees, and walking down to the river. God, if this doesn't make your heart skip a beat, something's wrong with your heart. What a happy day to be here. And to Jeffrey and everybody at the Department of State and the Cultural Affairs and everybody who's been a part of this, everybody in the audience and a lot of folks who are our Kalmar Nickel friends, thank you so much for your role in all of this. We, for years, we had National Park Service for over 100 years now. For the first 97 years of the National Park Service, if people wanted to find out about a national park in Delaware, originally they could go to catalog or looks like stuff, buy a book or something. And then we got the internet, and then for years people could go on the internet and they could look up the National Park Service and see, well, what states have national parks. And they could go from A to Z, or A to W, and see what states had national parks. And until about 3 years ago, they'd get to D's, the D's, and there's nothing there for Delaware. And you go to the National Park website today, see what's offered at all these different states, the 50 states in terms of national parks, and you get to Delaware, and there's a story. It tells a story about how a little state called Delaware helped to start a nation, and we think we've done pretty good. And 240 years later, sometimes we're challenged, sometimes it's difficult. You only have to turn on your TV to understand and appreciate that. But I think we're going to get through this. If this country, I'll close with this. If this is a country where we took on the most powerful nation on earth, the Brits, beat them once, War of Independence, beat them twice, War of 1812. We had a civil war that pulled us apart, tore us apart, survived through that. We came out of the Great Depression, mightiest economic nation on earth, won World War I, won World War II, won the Cold War, and we started this century as the most powerful nation on earth, strongest economic nation on earth, most productive workforce on earth. We actually had 4 balanced budgets in a row at that time, as you might remember. If we can get through all of that and be the great nation we are today and have wonderful national parks like this, we can get through whatever faces our country today, here in this country and around the world. God bless you. For everybody that's had a role in this, thank you so much. Ethan, thanks for being our leader. And now, P.S. It's been 100 years since a naval ship, U.S. naval ship, was named after the state of Delaware. 100 years ago. And about 4 years ago, I called an old governor, a guy named Ray Mabus, who's now the U.S. Secretary of the Navy. I said, Governor Mabus, this is Tom Carper. And I said, you know, it's been 100 years since there's been a ship named after the state of Delaware. And do you ever think you'd have a ship that maybe we could name after the state of Delaware? And he said, let me think about it. We'll think about it. He called me back 6 months later. And he said, we're going to build in a couple of years some Virginia-class fast attack nuclear submarines. And, you know, I want to build one of them after the state of Delaware. And I said, you got it. And about 3 or 4 months ago, we laid the keel down in Newport News, Virginia. Jill Biden was there. And about a year and a half from now, we're going to have not a keel laying, but we're going to have the christening of the USS Delaware. So we've had a long naval tradition from Kalmar Nickel 378 years ago to the USS in Delaware, USS in Fast Attack 791. God bless you all. Thank you.
Okay, well, as you notice, I did not wear the hat today. So without further ado, we're going to do this ribbon cutting.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
0. Woohoo!
All right.